Good morning, everyone. Welcome along to Bodhi Buddhism for our fourth course in our series of classes about Buddhism and Buddhist practices called Buddhist Psychology. So I'd like to welcome you all along today. Those of you who are long-time viewers and listeners, and also those of you who maybe are joining us for the first time today. So today is the first class of this new course called Buddhist Psychology. I'll be talking a little bit about the content, not just of today's class, but also about our 6 classes, our 6 weeks worth of classes in a minute. But perhaps just because it's the start of this new course and we might have some new people, perhaps I'll just say a few words about Bodhi Buddhism and also myself. So my name's Matt Osborne. I'm also known as Hui Fong in Chinese. I'm presently based in Taiwan, and I've been involved in Buddhism, and particularly Chinese Buddhism, Taiwanese Buddhism, for 20 years now. Originally I come from New Zealand, and back in 2000 I became a novice monk in then studied at a Buddhist seminary for a few years, also some time doing meditation practice, served in a few different departments within large monastery of Foguangshan, one of the largest monasteries based in Taiwan. And then about 16 years ago, I also studied for my master's degree and PhD in Buddhist studies at the University of Hong Kong. And after that, I've been teaching at a few different universities, both in Taiwan and also Thailand, and also actually before I graduated for a little bit of time in Hong Kong as well. So that's my background. A few years ago now, 3 years ago now, I disrobed and returned to lay life. And so my experience with Buddhism and Chinese Buddhism includes both as a layperson and as a monastic, and also a lot of time as a scholar and somebody who spent a lot of time, studying not just Chinese language and texts, but also Sanskrit and Pali, and trying to, I just really want to understand what is Buddhism and what's it all about. And that's part of the reason why I set up the Bodhi Buddhism courses. Originally, they didn't start on Facebook here. I originally started doing them live in person. This was a while ago now. It was quite a while ago now, actually, about a year ago. And we were doing them in person, but already at that time had the idea that maybe we should take this online, because I do know that there are a lot of people all around the world in all sorts of different places that are interested in Buddhism, but particularly for good English language information about the Chinese traditions in particular. It's not that easy to get, to be honest, if we compare it to, say, English language material about the Theravadan traditions or about Tibetan traditions, about, say, Japanese Zen traditions. There's a lot of material. There's a lot of very experienced teachers, but for the Chinese traditions, not quite so much. And so, while often people might say, well, just go find a monastery or find a Dharma group or a Buddhist group, we can't always have such a group where we live. And so coming and bringing then the Bodhi Buddhism community online onto Facebook, I thought is a good way to then reach out to people anywhere. And of course, recently, it's also a very good thing given the world's present situation with the COVID-19 situation, where many of us, even if we wanted to go and visit some temples or monasteries, might feel like, hey, we can't do that, or we might not even be able to do that at all. So perhaps right now, in the comfort of your own home, you don't even have to put on a face mask. You can set yourself up nice and comfy, turn on your computer or put your phone on, tune into Facebook, and hey, here we are. We're having this live stream class. So it's morning time where I am. I'm not sure where all you people are. If you're joining us, doesn't matter where you're joining us from. If you're tuning in, please drop a comment there into the little Facebook comments section. Oh, which reminds me, I need to open the window in my browser so I can see what's going on there. That's not very well organized of me, is it? Okay, so I'll be tuning in on that, and then if you've got any comments, and also if you have any questions, you can put those there into the comment section, the discussion section, and that's how we can have some kind of interaction as well. And of course, it's one of the not so great things about doing courses online like this, as opposed to in person. We're like there sharing that same space. When we do it online, we're kind of a little bit disconnected, which is a bit unfortunate. Okay, now I need to tune in to my events here. I'm sorry, I would normally have this little we normally have this open already, and now they've changed the format of Facebook, so then I have to like go around and try to figure out where all this is going on in Facebook here. Okay, is this happening right now? I think this is it right now. Okay, I see we've got some comments already from Eric, good morning. From Jay Lee, good morning. From Hanuman, good morning. And from Terry, good morning. Good morning to you all. Good to see you all. Thanks for joining us. And I see we've got a few other different people online there as well. So as I said, if you're joining us, please feel free to throw in a comment. Oh, we've got Mika as well. Nice to see you. Drop in a comment, or if you've got any questions along the way, please feel free to put them out here. Okay, now as I was saying, this is our fourth kind of course for the Bodhi Tree Buddhism community, and all the other courses that we've had are also, the videos for them can be found here on Facebook. You should be able to go into the Bodhi Tree page and go into our video section, and you should be able to see them all there. Though I will kind of point out, the first course that we did that was originally like live in person, the video and the recording wasn't very well set up, so some of those aren't quite so good quality. But for the second course, which we did on the Tiantai school teachings of calm and insight meditation, and then just recently the course number 3, which was looking at mindfulness meditation using some of the early Buddhist scriptures on mindfulness practice. All those videos, you can find them here on the Bodhi Tree page and under the videos. And also you can find them on YouTube. So while I'm streaming here, I'm also recording, and then after class, sooner rather than later, and then uploading those videos onto YouTube. And so if you go into YouTube, you should be able to Google them up, and you should be able to find them in there. And I've noticed in the last few weeks there's been a few views. Some of them may be from you, some of them might just be from other people searching YouTube for some good Dharma classes. Okay, so just to let you know that maybe you're like so busy today you can't finish watching the class live, don't worry, you can come back later and check it out. And you can, if there's bits and classes that you want to hear about later, you can go back and listen to them again. Okay, so where were we? This week, okay, so that's just an introduction to who we are and what we're doing. Now, this week, we're starting the first one on Buddhist psychology. But before I actually jump into the content, I'd just like to add a little kind of new thing for this course, not just today, but for the next 6 weeks, at the start of the class and at the end of the class. And it's just a slightly more traditional way of doing it. In the Chinese traditions, even if you have a class, like in the classroom, often we will begin with an invocation. So basically what we do is we would join palms and we make an invocation to Shakyamuni Buddha. So Shakyamuni Buddha is what we might, often in English we might call the historical Buddha, so Buddha Siddhartha Gautama. And we just, we use Namo Benshi Sijiamoni for. We'll do this part in Chinese, okay? Namo just means it's like a namaste, right? So when we say namaste, it just means like respect to you or salutations to you. It's a way of greeting, but it's also out of reverence. So Namo Benshi just means kind of like primary teacher or fundamental teacher, meaning that in our present age, the Buddhist teachings that we have come from Shakyamuni Buddha. So Namo, so homage to or respect to. Benshi, our fundamental teacher, our root teacher. Sijiamoni Fo. Now Sijiamoni Fo in Chinese is very ancient transliteration. It's the phoneticization of Shakyamuni Buddha. So in modern Mandarin, Sijiamoni, if you say it in some other dialects, it sounds more like Sakyamuni, Shakyamuni, and for a very ancient pronunciation of that character, like almost 2,000 years ago, it's not pronounced for, it would be pronounced but. And originally it's not just for, it's for Buddha. So it would be Sakyamuni Buddha. So in modern Mandarin, Namo Benshi Sijiamoni Fo. So we're going to do that 3 times at the start, just in a minute. And then at the end, which I'll explain later, we're going to do the 3 refuges, which also includes a dedication. So if you're sitting comfortably now, I'd like you to join your palms. And if you like, you can close your eyes and you can maybe even visualize the Buddha as though the Buddha is with us, as though the Buddha is gracing us with his presence, because these teachings are from the Dharma. And as the Buddha said, if you want to see the Buddha, you need to see the Dharma. So that's our focus. Okay. Namo Benshi Sijiamoni Fo. Namo Benshi Sijiamoni Fo. Namo Benshi Sijiamoni Fo. Okay, so that's how we're going to start our classes for these next few weeks. Okay, we are on Buddhist psychology. So what do we have for Buddhist psychology? Let me flip from this view, and I'm going to flip in. I've kind of made a very simple PowerPoint. I hope it comes through okay. Just a very simple PowerPoint, nothing too fancy, to look at this topic and just provide our notes for today. Okay, first of all, a little overview on what we're going to be covering in the next 6 weeks. So today we're going to talk about some of just really simple concepts, body and mind, the relationship. We're talking about psychology, so it's the mind, but of course, as soon as we start talking about the mind, we also have the issue of the body and, you know, what's Buddhism's take on this? What is the status of mind and also the status of the body and their interrelation? And then we're going to look at a very standard system in Buddhism known as the 5 aggregates. Okay, the 5 aggregates. And we're going to talk about those, just introduce them basically. But in the second week, we're going to get into a bit more detail, because this week we're kind of just going to talk about each of those 5. But then next week we're going to talk in more detail about how those 5 interact and coordinate together to make up not just like who we are, everything about our whole kind of experiential world, but first of all we're going to look at the whole process of sense perception. Just how do we see the world, and what's this relationship between me as this subjective experiencing living being and the world around me. Okay. And then we're going to see the 5 aggregates. It's such a powerful system. Week 3, we're going to then make a step a little bit deeper and go not just from sense perception, but also throughout this process, what's this thing that Buddhism has about what we might call afflictions or defilements? So how do these afflictive emotions and afflictive views, the emotion side is kind of more of I think in popular terms we say like the heart, distress of the heart, but you can also have distress of the mind, like an intellectual side as well. So we can kind of look at this afflictive emotions and views as kind of like problems with the heart and problems with the mind, or the brain, if you like. Okay, week 4, we're going to look at a particular teaching from the Yogacara school of Buddhism, a form of Mahayana Buddhism, and in particular this teaching known as the storehouse consciousness the storehouse consciousness. Okay, and it's a really powerful idea. And while and more scholarly people would probably say, oh, that's a teaching that belongs to the Yogacara school. But when it really comes down to it, particularly in East Asian Buddhism, it doesn't matter what school of Buddhism you are in East Asian Buddhism, almost all the schools, I think all the schools use this particular teaching and this particular idea to explain a huge amount of important things, not just about perception and these afflictions, but just life in general. Week 5, we're then going to look into the meditative mind, so the psychology of meditation and what is going on in the mind when we're meditating. And then we're going to work that through to week 6, the liberated mind. So meditation has a purpose, and that purpose is liberation and freedom. Okay, so that's our basic kind of overview of what we're going to cover there for those classes. I hope that's all good with you so far. That's our basic outline. It's kind of flexible, so if you do have any other ideas, please feel free to throw in your suggestion. But that's what I've got planned for now. Okay. So far so good. Let us continue there with our little PowerPoint notes. Okay, so week 1, body and mind, the 5 aggregates. Now, even before I jump into the kind of Buddhist take on body and mind, or the 5 aggregates kind of in more specific terms, let's just think about this in even broader terms, because I think for people that are new to Buddhism, some of the biggest challenges aren't just about these kind of like little specific details of practice. It's about this kind of whole world view, the way in which we think about the world. What is the world made up of? What is the world comprised of? Because that also includes myself as an element of the world. And even then, like, how do we perceive like our own status as sentient creatures within the world? This is a big question, and I think a lot of people new to Buddhism, if maybe you're coming from other religious traditions, or maybe you're coming from more sort of atheistic, particularly strictly materialistic points of view, there's some big things we need to deal with here. So I'm just going to throw out a couple of different kinds of ways of looking at the world, shall we say. Now, the first set are some kind of old ideas that scholars of religious studies used to have. They used to believe this was kind of like this natural evolution of human thought or human religious thought. It's probably not so natural, and it's definitely not inevitable evolution, but anyway, we'll throw it out there. So animism, so basically meaning the idea that the belief that kind of like everything has some kind of soul or spirit. So I'm looking at this camera has some kind of spirit to it, this microphone, my cup, the computer, my clothes, the food, the trees, the birds, people, of course, rocks, the sun, the moon, and so on and so forth, the stars. All of these have some kind of like spirit. They have some kind of like life force in them. So this, of course, is very, a lot of ancient religions or ancient beliefs kind of have this sort of worldview. We have polytheism, which isn't so much that like everything has a spirit, but there are still multiple kinds of spirits or kind of gods or some kind of higher powers. And again, we can look at, let's just look at something like, the ancient Greeks believed in lots of different gods. Some gods were more powerful, some were less powerful. You had the gods like the Olympians, but you also had like the Titans. Are the Titans gods? I know, it's a good question, right? But they believed in multiple numbers of other different higher powers than humans. But then at the same time, they didn't necessarily believe that kind of like rocks or my microphone sitting on the desk in front of me were necessarily had some kind of like sentience to them. So this is, can you see the shift there? Good old monotheism. And you can see in particular, if I just kind of list these three out, why maybe 100 years ago, a lot of particularly Western European scholars of religion who themselves were Christians and believed in the supremacy of kind of a Christian worldview thought that humans in general evolved from animism to polytheism and then to monotheism. Therefore, monotheism was this kind of higher religion, so one God. But even the belief in one God, there's lots of different ways we can kind of conceive that. Is it like a God that creates and then steps back from his, her, or its creation? Is it a God that's constantly creating or constantly involved in creation? Lots of questions going on there as well. But each of these different views changes the way we perceive the world, and then changes the way in which we respond to and act in the world, and in particular, from a Buddhist point of view, how we have a sense of agency or not. If we think everything is God's creation, that can seriously change our own sense of agency. Materialism, which is not a theism at all, says it's just apart from this material things of the world, there is nothing else. There are no higher powers. And even like our own thoughts, for example, are not really things. They're just this kind of byproduct of matter. And then we have another slightly different one as well. Again, another new one, psychologism, which, as I understand it, it isn't purely a materialistic viewpoint, but it believes that a lot of things that happen in the world, and even in the material world, are due to our own minds and our own psychologies. So, it could be that things in the external world happen to us because of the ways that we think and the ways that we believe or the ways in which we act. And then all these different views, then when they want to break down the world, some of these worldviews believe in like atoms. We can break the world down into little like particles. And this isn't just like modern science. Of course, when even in science they believed in atoms, they thought they were irreducible. Of course, now atoms get broken down to subatomic particles, and they come up with all sorts of really cool and funky names for these subatomic particles. It's pretty cool. But even in ancient times, they often believed that, the material world at least was made up of these kind of, it might be like earth, water, fire, and air, for example. Some other worldviews believe in souls. That could be animism, which kind of believes in like souls or spirits. Everything has like some kind of soul or spirit. Or it could be that only like humans have souls, or maybe humans and animals have souls. Maybe humans, animals, and gods have souls. Again, a range of different views and beliefs. Some believe in substances. This can be a slightly more abstract version of souls, or it could be another kind of substance, is like the idea of energy, is like everything is energy in just a different form. And that can be like, some forms of materialism can be like that. The idea that, everything is just energy, but even, right, E equals mc squared. So even mass is energy. So mass is just energy in a particular form. But even that kind of view can be not just in the material world. So there are also some religious beliefs that kind of portray like some kind of God or spiritual power that's also energy. And all the things of the world are just these manifestations of some kind of spiritual energy or divine substance or power. So a lot of different views, right? A lot of different takes on it. Where do we stand in this? So let's now take a step into the Buddhist take. Okay, how are we going so far? So I've got to like bounce back every time I want to have a look at the browser. Okay, I think in the browser I'm not seeing any new comments coming through. I hope I don't need to. Do I need to refresh or something? Let me just click on that button and see if I need to refresh maybe. Okay, we've just got Pasquale checking in with a good morning. Okay. Sorry, just checking back to see if anyone's like got any problems or any questions. Let's just continue going there. Where were we? So what's the Buddhist take on this? Let's just get back to two basic things. In all these theories, we've got two kinds of things. One is the body or the physical, the material world, the things that we like touch, see, right? Smell, taste, hear. that's on one side. But then there's also this kind of other side as well. Things, thoughts, for example, emotions, we can't touch them or taste them. We could maybe give them a metaphorical color or a metaphorical flavor, but it would be metaphorical. So this, I think, is a good place to enter into one of the simplest Buddhist analysis of the world. What is the world comprised of? So commonly, I'm just using the term body and mind because it's a good English expression, body and mind. The first one there in the Buddhist take is rupa. So rupa, this word in Sanskrit or Pali, same word in Sanskrit or Pali. In Chinese, se. And basically, rupa is physical form, body, matter. So, you can already see there's a little distinction here, right? The physical form or body is of like an individual person, but we can also talk about rupa as matter. So if I, point at the image of the Buddha behind me, this is also physical. It's a physical image. And it's kind of interesting, actually, because a Buddha statue is also known as a Buddha rupa. It's like a physical, I'm not going to say embodiment. It's a physical representation of the Buddha. But also other things, my clothes, a cup, a microphone, your laptop in front of you. All these things are physical things. And they occupy space, right? They take some kind of specific location or locale within space and are visible. Now, not all matter from the Buddhist take is visible. Sound, for example, is not visible. But we can perceive it with our 5 external senses. And then on the other side, we have what often gets translated as mind. Usually when we talk about body and mind in the simple analysis, we have rupa and nama. Again, same in Pali and Sanskrit. In Chinese, it's Ming, which, if you know a bit of Chinese, you say, well, Ming just means name. So just a second. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We might say body and mind, but nama literally means name. Though in a broader sense, it very often gets translated as something like mind, or you might call it psyche. Sometimes I like to talk about nama and rupa as like psychophysical. So you've got the psychological side, which is kind of a subjective side, and the physical side, this matter. And of course, nama is incorporeal. It's not the body, it's not embodied, and it's also not located. So we can't like locate a thought. Is if I'm having a thought, is the thought in this room or in that room? Now we might think, well, because I'm in this room, therefore the thought's in this room, but that's associating the thought with the body. Normally we just say, look, it doesn't have a location. I can't say, how big is my thought? Is it this big or is it this big? It doesn't work like that. It's not spatially located. And of course, it's also not visible. Now, we can't see thoughts. We can't see emotions, for example. We can see people's external expressions. When somebody's angry, they have like an angry look, or, if they're happy, they have a happy look. But we're not actually seeing the emotion itself. We're seeing the physical representation of it. So why do they use the term nama? A lot could be said about that, and you could write a whole research paper on this question. But let's just say for now, just as if I say, here's a piece of paper. So there's the paper itself, and I have the name paper, right? So the paper is kind of, the word paper is like an abstraction from this, and we can distinguish between the thing and the name for the thing. And then the name from the thing comes about from a mental process. So maybe that's one way of looking at this distinction between body and mind, rupa and nama in a Buddhist sense. Now, one thing to note is, like in contemporary English, it's quite common to talk about like body, mind and soul, for example. And that might be a big question somebody might have about Buddhism. Well, is there kind of a place for a soul within this? Now, that's a big question, and it depends a lot on what we mean by soul. But in general, a lot of the things that many other traditions might refer to as the soul, if it talks about, deeper intuition, if we're talking about deeper emotions, universal love or compassion, for example, we talk about, wisdom, true knowledge or understanding. In the Buddhist take on things, these are still part of the mind, part of the psyche. They're a very special element of that. They're not the same as just my usual mundane thoughts about what I'm going to have for breakfast, but they're not kind of given their own separate thing that we might want to say body, mind, and soul. Now, where they fit within the kind of Buddhist take on mind, we're going to get to that in a second, okay? So if you've got that question in mind, just hang tight for now and we're going to get there. So this is a really simple analysis. Now, another important thing to note, because our class is Buddhist psychology, right? So here I'm talking about body and mind. But between these two, there's no hierarchy. Now, this is another important distinction. There's body and there's mind. The two of them interact with each other. Mental states can influence the body. I mean, I can think, lift my arm. That thought then has a physical response. But also the body can affect my mind. If my body is located somewhere where there's some sound, some music playing, I hear the music and I might have some emotional response to the music. There, it's the circumstances of my body that is helping lead to or create a state of mind. So the two of them mutually influence each other, and of course that process is related to Buddhist teaching on dependent origination. Things depend on other things, and so the relationship between body and mind is a two-way relationship, and that's important to note again if we compare it to, say, pure materialism, which says, okay, well, just mind is just like a byproduct of body. Or maybe some forms of like psychologism, whereby people might think the body is just purely a product of the mind, like a kind of a one-way relationship. In Buddhism, no, it's two-way. Now that's a really simple analysis, and of course there's, the body is made up of lots of different parts. It's an incredibly complex system. The mind, perhaps even more so. So we do need something a little bit more sophisticated, and let's have a look then at this really basic idea, core idea known as the 5 aggregates. Now the first one, hey, we've seen this one before. It's good old Rupa. Okay, I'm just going to flip back and have a look and see if there's any comments coming through from any of you there. Any comments coming through? Is that going to scroll on me? Okay, we do have some comments here. We got Hanuman says, I'll reserve my questions for later. Okay, sure thing. Okay, yeah, we will have a bit of Q&A time at the end there. From Mika, commenting as a physicist, a lot of physics view the universe can be reduced to energy, though it is not always practical. Yeah, it's a very good example there, Mika. So for those of you who don't know Mika, yeah, Mika's a physicist. I believe you're an astrophysicist, right? He's a guy who looking out there into space, and wow, I had some conversations with Mika about, yeah, he's a hardcore astrophysicist and knows a lot about this, and that's a very good point of view. So a lot of the physics views that the universe can be reduced to energy, right? So I don't know what the views are like Big Bang Theory, but maybe it's this idea that like it's just this some kind of massive energy explosion, and what we have now is all just this energy taking some other form. Okay, so we've got a question here from Jonathan. Teacher, physical is more related to physical form. Is there exist a formless body? Yeah, and sorry, the comments are coming through thick and fast now, and they are scrolling off the bottom of my page. This new Facebook setting. I'm needing to get used to it here. Okay. I'm sorry, Jonathan, your question just disappeared off the bottom of the page, and it won't give them all to me back. Where are they? Oh my goodness. I think your question there, Jonathan, was something about, is there a formless body? If you mean, okay, well, short, yes, there is. So Buddhism does believe that it's some kind of higher forms of life. They do have a body, but it's not the same kind of, shall we say, coarse physical matter as the human body. It's a more subtle form. One way, from looking at the scriptures and the descriptions of these beings, and they're kind of divine beings, it's as though they have a body made of light, so you can see it and it's got a shape and a form, but it's not this kind of body that's literally built up of food, of physical food. So that's a kind of a more subtle body. And we also have ideas, what is known as the mind-made body, which is pretty similar. It's a kind of a form. It does occupy some kind of space, and it can be seen in certain circumstances by certain people, not necessarily everyone. But it is kind of still regarded as a form of a body, and it's not identical to the mind, which doesn't have any kind of shape or visible form. We've got some comments here from Venerable Kidrup. So Venerable Kidrup is an old friend. He's a translator and a scholar on the Tibetan traditions. There's a comment there about, I think one of your comments might have dropped off the bottom of the page there, Venerable, I'm sorry. The Rupakaya, through which the benefit of others is achieved. Yes, so this is in Mahayana. So you're asking the question there, is it the same in Chinese Mahayana? Yeah, so the Rupakaya, usually in Chinese Mahayana, they won't talk about the Rupakaya so much as the Nirmanakaya. So Rupakaya would literally be the physical body of the Buddha. But it's believed that in turn from the Buddha is kind of manifested through the Buddha's mental power, in which case it's a Nirmanakaya, it's like a created body. But yes, it is there. The Buddha creates these kind of corporal, physical forms in the world to be of benefit to others. And the Dharmakaya, the Dharmakaya kind of, we're talking about like truth, and the Buddha as truth, or the Buddha as reality itself. Realization of which, of course, is basically equivalent to liberation or realization. So, as I just said, Venerable, I think some of your questions dropped off the bottom. I'm going to have to check out how this new Facebook system is working. But I think that sounds pretty much the same in the Chinese Mahayana traditions. Okay, and another comment from Mika there. Big Bang is an expansion of energy. Okay, sure. And then some comments there from Venerable Rukai. Nice to see you joining us there. Hope you can keep up with what we're doing here today. Okay, so thanks for your questions, everyone. I'll work on getting that. Those comments coming through back in order as we go. Okay, so let's head back there to our PowerPoint. We were talking about rupas, physical matter, body. Okay, we've got that. And human beings. Let's just focus for the moment on human beings, even though there are lots of other life forms in Buddhist worldview. Now, of the five aggregates, rupa is the first one, but it's also the only one that isn't mind. So that's why I'm using this system, even though the class is Buddhist psychology. The second one is Vedana. In Chinese, that's shou, which kind of means to receive something. And that includes feelings, sensations, and often even the term Vedana, just in Sanskrit or Pali, can also refer to kind of experiences. I'm just going to list them through. I'll go back and detail them in a second. We have samjñā, xiang, which includes perceptions and conceptions, and we can say thoughts. Perceptions and concepts, thoughts, where we use words and language. Okay. So I think in general, a lot of people, when we're thinking about mind and we're talking about mind, people I think often equate mind with thinking, like thinking with words and language. Of course, mind is far more complex than that. But this one here, samjñā, is that category of thinking and concepts, using language to represent things. Our fourth one is sanskara, often gets translated as volitions or formations or conditionings. Personally, one of the terms I prefer to use is emotions. Emotions. They are the movers. So we can kind of see then between samjñā and samskara, we've kind of got the thinking part and also kind of the feeling part. And last of all, last but not least, we have vijñāna. Now this is almost always in English translated as consciousness. We might even say awareness. I kind of prefer cognition. And the more you get to know me, the more you know that I have my own terms that I prefer. I probably won't be 100% consistent because I also don't believe that we should, when we're talking about these things, just use one single term. Any idea's got lots of different aspects, and using a number of different terms helps to enrich our understanding, kind of flesh out all the aspects of it. So these are the basic ones. And so now next week we're going to talk in more detail about the process of cognition, and we'll see more about the relationship between them. But for now, I will outline it very simply. Let's just start from the rupa, the physical body. So if you imagine just you sitting there right now, you have a physical body, and that also includes your senses, your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. These are all part of your rupa, your physical form. Now, when our senses come into contact with the world, so for example, at the moment I'm looking at the camera, you might be looking at the screen or listening. When you are looking or you are listening or hearing, that is vijñāna. That is to be conscious of something. And it's important to note that at the level of vijñāna, at the level of consciousness, it is just that you are conscious of something. If I was to say, for example, oh, I'm looking at a camera and I'm looking at a camera, the fact that I know it's a camera isn't part of consciousness. The knowing of a camera is kind of a perception or a concept, it's a thought. So that is samjñā. Or also if I'm listening, maybe you think I have a very soothing voice. And so when you're listening, you feel very calm, right? It's a pleasant sound that you're listening to. You might be listening to music. It's using music rather than my voice. That pleasant feeling, that isn't consciousness. The pleasant feeling is vedana. Right? So the consciousness, the vijñāna, is just seeing or just hearing or just smelling, tasting, touching, or perceiving things also internally with the mind. When we do that, we also have different types of feelings or sensations. It might be pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. That's the aggregate of vedana. We might have some concept about what that is. We might have some name for that thing that we are seeing or smelling or tasting or touching. Some ideas about it. Those are samjñā. And then due to these feelings and due to these concepts and thoughts, we might also have some kind of emotional response. You hear some nice music, hear your favorite song on the radio, you turn up the radio, right? That act to, I want to turn up the radio. That is an emotion. It's a volitional act. That's samskara. Okay, now we're going to talk about this in more detail later. There's a lot to deal with here. But for now, I just want to let you know these basic 5 categories, the 5 aggregates, because it's a really good system. Now, there are lots of other different systems in Buddhism for kind of looking at who we are. As we just gave one earlier, right? Body and mind. But I find the body and mind one, the mind category, is like not enough detail, right? It's just like everything, oh, that's all just mind. It's like we want more detail. We want to see all these aspects of the mind. Now there are also other systems that provide even more detail, a lot more detail, and we're going to slowly introduce those as we go. In particular, the Abhidhamma traditions and the Yogacara traditions provide a lot more detail for all of these 5. But we'll get there. We'll get there when we get there. For now, let's just keep these 5 in mind. We have Rupa, the physical body. We have Vedana, which are our feelings, sensations, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. We have Samjna, which are like our thoughts and concepts and perceptions about things that use words and language. We have Samskaras, which are emotional volitions or impulses. They could be towards or against, and jealousy, pride, anger, compassion, generosity. And we also have just Vijnana, which is just this bare kind of being consciously aware of things. Like my eyes are open and I can see, right? Or I can hear sounds. And all of these come together. Next week, we'll talk about how they interact. We're going to look at lots of examples. I hope that will provide you with more details then. But for now, let's just leave it here. Again, I'm going to pop back and see if you guys are throwing a bunch of questions out there for me. Okay, we've got... okay, so a question from Hanuman here. Kind of explain the distinctions between nama, chitta, and cognition later. Okay, yeah, we will. So... okay, well, let me just mention it now. So nama, as just mentioned, often in the Buddhist system, like body and mind, the so-called mind category just gets called nama. So it would be like name and form, name and form. If it's not form, if it's not physical form, then it's name. It's name. It's not a solid thing that I can touch or occupy space. That's all nama. Chitta. Now, even this term chitta has kind of narrower and broader senses. So, one way, in the broader sense, it's kind of the same as nama. It just means all the non-material things. So, consciousness, feelings, sensations, perceptions, concepts, emotions all come into the broad category of chitta. But in a narrower sense, chitta was often, particularly later, used to just refer to basically to like vijnana. So chitta just was this act of like seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting. You've got to be first consciously aware before we can have thoughts or ideas or feelings or emotions. And that idea, that kind of distinction, became the standard system for almost all Buddhist schools after going through this kind of Abhidharma period. So I just want to say that again. So what later happened was chitta becomes basically synonymous with vijnana, and almost all the schools believe that you had to first have vijnana. You had to first be consciously aware through any of your senses before we can talk about things like the sensations and the perceptions and the ideas and the emotions, be the emotions good or bad, etc. And so if you don't have that conscious awareness, if I'm not seeing, I can't see that it's a camera. If I'm not seeing, I can't know that it's white. I've got to see before I can see white. I've got to be hearing before I can hear that, oh, that's a Mozart symphony. Right? Get the idea? So that kind of distinction. I hope that kind of helps for now, Hanuman. Again, we'll be talking more about this for these next few weeks, okay? So we've got time. Okay, just a couple more little things I'd like to mention in regard to Buddhist like analyses of the mind and also the body. Because like I said, we can't, I know the class Buddhist psychology, but we can't ignore the body because it's not mind-body dualism, where they're just two separate things, each to their own. They relate. And, as I just said, if we can't have feelings and perceptions and emotions without having conscious awareness, we can't have conscious awareness without the sense organs in the first place. Right? So they're inseparable. But this system of 4 out of 5 are mental. Only one of them is physical. Now, there are some other systems of analysis, really quickly. A common one is the 12 entrances, which deals with our senses and sense objects. So we have like material forms, visible forms that we see with the eyes. We have sounds that we hear with the ears, scent, smells, whatever term you want to use, through the nose, tastes or flavors which we perceive or are conscious of with the help of the tongue. We have tactile objects or tangible objects that we perceive through the body, and we also have mental objects that we perceive through the mind. So the mind is a sense organ itself, and the mind can perceive all those other internal mental events. So this is a good system to then becoming very aware of the different, what we call the different sense doors. And particularly next week we go into sense perception, and then the process of afflictions and whatever. It's really important to know which of our senses is presently kind of doing the operation, and even more so for meditation practice. So the 12 entrances, the 12 ayatanas, Chinese shi-ru, or sometimes shi-chu. And then the other big common system are the 18 elements, the 18 dhatus. And these two systems are really closely related, because the 18 elements is basically just the 12 entrances plus the 6 kinds of consciousness or cognition. So we have visual objects and we have our eyes, and from that we have visual cognition or seeing, right? You've got to have an object to see. You've got to have healthy living eyeballs before we can talk about having visual cognition to be able to see something. And likewise, we've got to have some sound in our ears before we can hear, before we can smell, taste, or touch. Okay, I know I'm throwing out kind of the technical words. Visual, auditory, olfactory means smelling, gustatory, and tasting. And tactile, the ones that we perceive with the body, hands or feet. It also includes like sensing temperature or a sense of balance. And last of all, of course, we have mental cognition with the mind. So the system of the 18 elements just uses the 12 entrances. It adds on the 6 types of cognition, 6 types of vijnana, to kind of round out this whole picture. Okay, so this is another important system to keep in mind. Again, for now, I'm just kind of listing out these things. In the next week or 2, or 3 or 4, we'll be talking in more detail about like how do these work together. One of my teachers when I was at Hong Kong, and also he was my secondary PhD dissertation advisor, Professor Karuna Dasa, very great scholar of Theravada Buddhism, particularly Theravada and Abhidhamma. He'd always teach us that that when we're doing this kind of understanding of things, so understanding of the world or living beings or the mind, we need kind of 2 takes on it. One is kind of an analysis. We need to be able to look at all the component parts that make up the mind. But that's not enough. It's not enough to just break it down. We also need a synthesis to know how all these elements come and work together. So, if we're going to say what's a car, what is a car, an automobile, it's not enough to just like take a car and break it down into all its little component parts and just say that's a car. A bunch of component parts is not a car. It does not function as a car, right? But it's also not enough to just sort of say, well, it's something that like moves around on a road. I mean, a dog or a human can run around on a road. They're not a car. We need to know the parts, but we also need to know how they come together and work together. And these 2 elements, the analysis and synthesis, should provide a more complete picture. So today we've kind of more focused a bit on analysis, as I just mentioned earlier. Next week, just go back a few different slides here. Where were we? Tick, 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 undoing the class. Okay, there we go. Next week we're going to get into the process of sense perception, where we'll really see how they work together, and also the process of afflictive emotions and views. Again, we're going to see how these all work together, and even the storehouse consciousness is again going to talk about the individual parts, seeds in the mind, but also how they all work together as a whole. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was showing the screen with that. There we go. Process of perception, the affliction, storehouse consciousness. We're going to take a more synthetic approach and see how they operate together as a whole. Okay. Now I'm just looking at the time now. It's 9:55. So we've got a couple more questions here. We'll just have a little bit of time for some Q&A, and then what we're going to do, I should have mentioned at the start. So all of our classes in this series, we're going to do like kind of about an hour of class, like we're doing now, and in the last half hour, we're going to do some meditation. The last two courses that we did here, we did textual readings and then meditation, and we were reading meditation texts and then meditating using those practices. I think there's a lot of interest still in the meditation side, but I didn't want to tie it so tightly to a particular text. So we're doing this, and then we're just going to sit down, we're just going to do our own basic meditation at the end, and then we just have another maybe 5-10 minutes at the end where we can kind of wrap up or have any further questions. Okay, well, I've got a couple more questions here. From Eric, these 5 aggregates are of Hindu origin and modified, contextualized by Buddhism? No, not really. The term 5 aggregates, so Panchaskanda, does come from pre-Buddhist traditions, but it means a totally different thing. It literally refers to 5 heaps of firewood. So the ascetic practice of sitting out there with a fire in front of you, behind you, left and right of you, and the sun above you. You're sitting meditating in the midday sun in the middle of summer by the Ganges River. If that's not hot enough, 45 degrees, you're lighting fires around yourself. These are your 5 heaps, which are your 5 fires. And you're going to use fire to purify yourself. Fire is purifying. So the Buddha uses concept, but he just basically says, no, the fire is affliction. The fire is craving and anger and ignorance. That's the fire. And you want to put that fire out. So the word does have pre-Buddhist origins, but used in a almost the opposite kind of sense. So I wouldn't say modified or contextualized. I would say used almost as satire to drive the Buddhist point away. Question from Andrew. Nice to see you here, Andrew. But isn't it possible to see without faculties? In dreams, we see without our eyes open. Well, we do have a faculty. We have the faculty of the mind in dreams. And we're not strictly speaking in the Buddhist sense seeing. That is an eternal image. Even like right now, for example, Andrew, if I ask you, Andrew, close your eyes. Think of, I don't know which one to think of. Think of a Buddha, your favorite Buddha statue or your favorite Buddha picture, right? Now, that image in your mind, it's similar to seeing. It has similar qualities, but it's not seeing. That is a mental image. So that image in your mind is a mental object. It is not a rupa. It's not a visual form as an object. And the sense faculty is your mind itself. So that's a Buddhist take. So we're not really seeing. We're actually having a mental event, which is a representation of seeing. And likewise for hearing. Hear some music in your dreams. And they all do have faculties, and those faculties it's the mind, the mental faculty. Okay, but thanks for your question. It's a good question. I don't have any new questions scrolling through on my feed right now, so maybe it's just delayed. But just looking at the time, I think it's time for us to stand up and do like a couple of minutes of stretches, and then we're just going to do a basic sitting session and come back, maybe 5-10 minutes Q&A time at the end. How does that sound? I know the regulars in particular, you're probably looking forward to your meditation. Okay, so what I'm going to do, is I'm going to switch to my other camera. Boom, over there. I'm going to drop down this so that so you can still see the top of my mic on the screen there. Okay, time for me to get up. Okay, so take your spot. Sorry, I'm just going to have a mouthful of water before I begin. So I hope you're in a space whereby you've got enough room to do some stretches and some meditation. I sometimes wonder if I'm just out here doing these stretches by myself and you guys are all just sort of sitting there on the couch. But anyway, it's all good. So really simple, because time is short. We're just going to stretch from the key joints, our ankles, back the other way, putting your focus onto that body part you're stretching. It's all part of our meditation practice. Being mindful of the body, back the other way. Okay, hands on the knees, and we can squat down, and then back. Just loosen up the knees, makes for more comfortable sitting. And we can do little circles with the knees, loosen them up, and back the other way. Okay, stand up, feet apart, hands on the hips, and we're just going to stretch at the waist. Okay, back the other way. So doing the ankles, the knees, and the hips, I find are probably the most important parts to stretch for most people. But then also the upper body, the spine, and try to open up your chest. Okay, so hands together, we're going to stretch up. I hope you have more ceiling space than I do. Breathing in, and then we're going to stretch down, breathing out, and then breathing up. Open up your chest, and then breathing down, stretching up, and breathing down, coming up, and relax to the sides. Feet apart, hands on your hips. You go one arm up and stretching over, stretching the side of the body. Change, breathing in, over, breathing out. Sorry, the space here is a bit small for me because the tatami floor is like raised up off the ground, so it makes the ceiling lower. Breathing out, and then breathing in and up, and over. Okay, shake your arms and legs, relax, relax, relax. Okay, if you've got your seat, grab your seat. Oh dear, I have forgotten to get my bell bowl this morning. I'm very sorry about that. Okay, you'll just be on voice command. Take your seat. You all know how to sit. We've done this for many weeks already. So, take your seat. You can stretch it out there. Okay, just here. I'm going to grab it from over here. Okay. So in this course, I'm not going to give kind of specific meditation instruction. But if you do want to ask questions about it at the end of the session, that's fine. Those of you that have been doing the last 2 courses with us, you can just continue with the meditation techniques we've been using there. Or if you've got your own practices, just feel free to use your own practice. That's okay. We're meditating together. We don't have to be doing exactly the same practice, okay? Okay. Take off your glasses and your other items. I leave mine on because I have to look at the time. Timekeeper's job is, it's like the worst job in the meditation hall. Everyone else can focus. And the timekeeper's like one eye open, looking at the time. Okay, so do what you need to do. We're going to sit maybe about 15 or 20 minutes, okay? just going to be using my good old breath meditation techniques. Mindfully aware of the inhalation and exhalation. Keeping my body upright in a good posture, but not too stiff. I want to be upright and alert, but also relaxed. Mindfully aware of the breath, whether it's short breath or long breath. Mindfully aware of the breath, becoming aware of the body, and mindfully aware of the breath, relaxing the body. So maintain your good posture, upright and alert, but relaxed and not tense. And whatever technique you're using, if you're distracted, your mind wanders, it's okay, it's going to happen. As soon as you are aware, bring your attention back to your object of meditation. Don't try to fight any distracted thoughts. You just focus on what you need to focus on and just persist. Patient persistence will lead to success. posture will help to keep the mind alert and clear. Be aware of any of the hindrances, be it desire, aversion, dullness, or excitedness. Take the appropriate antidote to that to return your mind to a clear and focused mindful state. Nice deep full breath in. Slowly exhale all the way out. Bring your awareness to your whole body. You just gently stretch and rock from left to right. Slowly moving from a sitting, unmoving state back to an active state. Breathe in. Exhale, stretching forward. To the left, move your left leg. Over the right leg. Look to the center. And up, breathing in. Stretch up, opening your chest. Roll your shoulders. Stretch your neck. Warming up your palms of your hands, rubbing them together. Massage, cover the eyes. Just gently massage around the eye sockets, forehead, temples, cheeks, face. Pulling the ears, particularly the earlobes. It's a vital spot there. The back of the head and neck, shoulders. Down your arms. Just warm up your palms again. And the chest, and the stomach, and the lower back. If you need to, you can just, you will need to unfold your legs, but if you need to massage, you can massage lower leg. Good spot is in the front here, just on the outside of the shin bone. It's about 3 fingers down from the top of the bone there. It's a vital spot. You can push on that if you're feeling numbness in the legs, and you can also twist around the ankles. Don't stand up if you've still got numbness in your legs. Just make sure you're getting all your feeling back first. Okay. Just take your time. I just need to move forward because I need to readjust and just change back to the other microphone here. Whoop, this needs to come up so it's not looking at my belly button. Okay. Okay, everyone. That was our meditation session. You can see that got a few comments here. Okay, just a reply there from Andrew. We've still got a little less than 10 minutes to end the session. So if you have any questions, please feel free to throw your questions out here now. So I'm just going to readjust that camera a little bit. Just the angle. If you've got any questions, please feel free to put your questions up on the little chat box there on Facebook. Before that, however, I'd just like to say at the end of our sessions, we're going to add a little thing as well. So remember, at the start of today's class, we added the invocation to Shakyamuni Buddha by joining our palms and saying Namo Benzi Sijamoni Fo. So respect to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. And at the end of our sessions, we're going to add the 3 refuges, and we're going to use an English translation of the standard 3 refuges in the Chinese tradition, which also kind of has a dedication of merit and a kind of a bodhisattva aspiration built into it. Those verses are from the Avatamsaka Sutra. Okay, so just to let you know. Okay, but I see we've got a question here from Hanuman. I'd like to know if there's a way to see the relationship of the aggregates during meditation. Yeah, there sure is. We first just need to learn about what the relationship between the aggregates are. And once we see that, I think anytime we're meditating, we are going to see how that kind of those processes of perception, those processes that also lead to afflictions, for example, take place. I think once we kind of need to understand like the theory, and then by using meditation and really calming the mind down and giving us that kind of calm and clarity, we can actually see that process. We can see it for ourselves, and we can see it much clearer than if we try to look at that process of mental function in a regular waking state. You know, if we're walking down the street in busy traffic and looking out for cars and thinking where we're going and whatever, I mean, the process is taking place, but we will be so focused on the objects that we won't have so much space to then reflect on what the mind's doing. And then in meditation, when we are we're kind of removing from objects, but of course objects still come up. By removing ourselves in general, calming down, when the objects do come up, we see that process. It's kind of like slowed down. We just see it in much more clarity. So yes, there certainly is, and we're going to be we need to cover kind of the theory in the next couple of sessions, and then I think you'll be able to see it more clearly for yourself. Of course, this is always something that like we need to do it over and over again. The more time we reflect on kind of the principles, and the more time we spend looking at that and examining that, the more obvious it is to us, until it becomes simply something that we're kind of doing all the time. We're all just constantly seeing how that's functioning. But it's a good question. Okay, not sure if we have any other more questions coming through. I'm sorry if any questions have been lost on the way, because at what I'm looking at in Facebook now, it's got the usual like, comment, share, 21 comments, but then it's only kind of showing up about 4 or 5 comments at a time, and when a new one comes, the other ones drop off the bottom. So I'm going to have to explore how this works better in the new Facebook kind of interface. So yeah, I mean, Hanuman's just posted some joined palms, but then I think another comment has just dropped out the bottom. Okay, work in progress. Okay, our time's drawing near. So just as we go into this final stage there, I first just like to pop up the text for our dedication and just kind of show it to you and explain it a little bit before we then recite it together. So as you can see, we've got, I go to the Buddha for refuge, I go to the Dharma for refuge, I go to the Sangha for refuge. And then each of the 3 lines, the second line is in vowing that all sentient beings. So this is kind of part of the Bodhisattva vows, that not only are we ourselves going to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha for refuge, but we're also hoping that all sentient beings can benefit of it. For the first one, we are aspiring that all these sentient beings will realize the great path, which is just realize Buddhahood, and aspire to the supreme state of mind, that's bodhicitta. So the basic core part of Bodhisattva path, the aspiration to become a fully awakened person, to become someone that's reached our fullest potential, so that we can be of benefit to others. For the second refuge, go to the Dharma for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings, and then shall deeply enter the collection of teachings and attain wisdom like the ocean. So the collection of teachings is all those teachings of the Buddha. In Chinese it's like Shenru Jingzang, so we say that sutras, but it includes all the Buddhist teachings. We need to study those, we need to learn about them, and by studying these teachings from the Buddha, we will have this oceanic wisdom, right? So vast and deep. And finally, taking refuge in the Sangha, vowing that all sentient beings shall themselves in turn be able to form their own community. Remember when we're talking about I'm on the Bodhisattva path, I want to become a Buddha, part of being a Buddha is teaching others, and that collection of people that are learning is a Sangha. I mean, a Sangha is just a community, really. There's 2 terms, Sangha and Ganna. It's just a collection or an association of people. So when we are with others learning and practicing, that is this community, that is the Sangha. And it's important, of course, that our Sangha be in harmony. It's called the sangha, so the harmonious sangha, as opposed to a community in which there's conflict, because that harmony, of course, is more conducive to our practice on the path. So these are the three refuges, and so I'd just like to ask you now, if you will, to join me in joining your palms together, and I'm just going to read them out, and I'd like you to read along with me. I go to the Buddha for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings shall realize the great path and aspire to the supreme state of mind. I go to the Dharma for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings shall deeply enter the collection of teachings and attain wisdom like the ocean. I go to the Sangha for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings shall unite and lead the community in harmony without any hindrance. And so saying, I think that wraps up our session for today. So thank you all for joining me and joining us all. We will be continuing with our Bodhi Tree Buddhism Buddhist Psychology Class 2, same time next week. So please mark it down or set a reminder. You can put a reminder on the Google event there and join us again. Bring along your questions. We're here to practice and learn together, and so I hope I can see you then. Okay, take care everyone.